Okay, so the final topic is Sundered, which George has been playing and I believe is out now. It kickstarted recently. It's from the same developers who made Jotun, which was another similarly hand-drawn art style game, although it was isometric versus side-on. Tell us a little bit more about it, George.
Oh my goodness. I have an entire review coming, which will probably do a lot more better than I'm going to do right now, but there's a lot to say about Sundered. The primary thing I wanted to bring up about Sundered is that we were talking about this before our official first podcast. I was talking about difficulty in video games, and Sundered is a game that unfortunately did not, for me, and I will say underline that again because there's a lot of people who like this game for good reason. But for me, it missed out on what real difficulty is. And the problem with it, and I'll explain to you what exactly it is that they have this thing called the horde system. And you'll hear kind of like almost kind of like Silent Hill. You hear this klaxon sound, this loud alarm noise, and then suddenly the screen will be rushed by 30 or 20 monsters. It depends on where you are in the game and how deep you are. But then suddenly you're just rushed with monsters, and they're all faster than you, first off and foremost. And it makes it so difficult to actually have any kind of skillful combat that you end up, even if you try to dodge out of the way, you just dodge into another enemy. And as I put it kind of in my review, it's not that you make a mistake, it's a death by 1,000 cuts. And it's a combat system that it didn't click with me, but so many people seem to be enjoying it, so I don't know what exactly it is I missed there, if it is something that's just maybe I didn't get the right angle on, but it's definitely something I wanted to bring up because I think there's a way to do a difficult game the right way, and I think there's a way to do it the wrong way. And when I look at games like Hollow Knight nailed a difficult game. It was almost perfect. I'm not sure, if you guys played it or seen it, but it just nailed the way that a game should be difficult because it's skill-based, whereas this one was it was a mess, is the best way I could put it. Maybe saying it was a mess is a bit harsh. It was it was just not exactly what I was expecting, and it's something because it's 90% of the game. 98% of the game is the combat aspect to it. It just completely turned me off, and it's a matter of when I play a video game, I play a video game to feel like the hero, like the action star, the guy who's jumping backwards and shooting and kicking, butt. But in Sundered, it definitely made me feel like I wasn't a hero. It felt like it celebrated its monsters more than it did its main hero, which is you, the player. And it's just something that it's very strange and something I thought would be interesting to bring up.
I got a similar vibe from the game as I did Dead Cells. Both of them were talking about how you had to get to certain points to unlock new abilities or new methods of getting about. And similarly, they were talked about regularly about their combat and about how they handled enemies. But the more that you kind of talk about the game, the more separate the two of them seem.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of difference between Dead Cells and Sundered quite a bit, where, Dead Cells is definitely more of a kind of like a straightforward game. I think it's a lot more of a replayability to it. There's a lot more just you kind of go, killing monsters. And I actually, comparatively, I felt way more powerful. I felt more of like a badass in Dead Cells than I do far more less in Sundered. Sundered, it's a very large, expansive game, and what basically happens is as you start fighting more and more monsters, you start collecting these shards, and these shards you just basically spend on passives like upgrading your attack or your defense. So eventually you do kind of catch up, but it's not because you catch up because you're so skillful as a player. It's just because you have the certain amount of numbers behind you suddenly, and I think that's kind of the major problem, because if you look at games like Dark Souls or something like that, even if you didn't have the numbers in Dark Souls, you could still make progress. You could still be like really, hit your dodges right and do this and that to get ahead, even if you didn't have those numbers behind you. The numbers certainly helped, but you were still capable of making progress. Where in Sundered, it was for me a very frustrating game because it didn't seem to matter what you were doing. That because of the horde system, 20 monsters come onto the screen and they're faster than you, they're going to kill you eventually. Death by 1,000 cuts is again what I have to say.
And that kind of death by 1,000 cuts, the way that you mentioned it, it reminded me, and I don't know if it reminded Terry of Heart of Darkness, which was a game, I think it was by the guy who did Another World, Eric Chahi, who then did From Dust.
Possibly. But, is that the PlayStation game?
Yeah, it was the PS1. I think it was a launch title. It was on 2 discs, which at the time everyone was like, wow, that's nuts. And you had the weird alien guy that was like, Acrobat. I can't remember what he was called.
Yeah.
But yeah, and it was all a dream, and you had a dog. And you had a weird Tesla laser, and you basically just had to paint the edge of the screen while simultaneously trying to just generally run forward. You're always trying to run forward. So it felt a little bit like Another World, if rather than stepping on things instantly killing you horribly, not moving in the right direction instantly killed you horribly by these horrible shadowy things that would all kind of leer out and try and grab you and try and pull you in. And then the second they pretty much landed a touch, or they, I suppose, got far enough across the screen, you were dead, and the whole kind of death by 1,000 cuts, is each one registering as a hit on you, or is it really a case that it's just a bigger swarm is forming because you're not killing them fast enough, and then you succumb to it?
Well, I mean, it's definitely it's probably a little bit of that for sure, because what happens is that the enemies, there's no spatial awareness, so the enemies kind of just stack up on top of each other. So one hits you, and then it might be actually like 4 or 5 that hit you all at once, and you just didn't notice. So it does create a situation where, in the name of progress, similar to things we've probably all done playing Dark Souls, if we've all played Dark Souls here, is that you kind of just run around enemies as fast as you can, just so you can actually make some freaking progress. And I want to save some surprises for the review, but that's definitely another thing that kind of turned me off about the game, is that you end up just kind of just running past enemies as fast as you can, just so you can actually make progress. And it just turned me off to the combat even more. But, again, there's a lot of people who do like this game, so I do want to underline that I did like Sundered for plenty of reasons, and there is plenty of great qualities to the game, but the combat just did not click with me.
So am I right in thinking that this is a procedurally generated game?
Yes, to a certain extent. There is basically there's this huge kind of like Metroidvania map, and there's key locations for certain things like bosses, powers, certain event areas are fixed locations. But between those areas, there's what I call procedural blocks. And then those procedural blocks are filled with procedural rooms that change every time you die. So you have to go through those procedural rooms to get somewhere, and it's constantly changing, which makes it also a little bit slow to get to certain places at times. It can get a little frustrating for sure.
Yeah, so I think that's probably where the difficulty comes from. Because like Dan was saying, with the games like Heart of Darkness, and he mentioned Another World, and things like Flashback, and possibly even something like, what is it? It's different mechanics, but Dragon's Lair. Those games were very, very hard, but it was just a case of you learnt the steps. It was just like, okay, 20 seconds, press that button, then jump, then do this, then do that. And over time, you just learnt the game and you could get through it. But obviously with a procedurally generated game, you're going to get screwed pretty much every time.
Pretty much, yeah. So it's definitely an example of just, I think there's a certain way to do a hard game, and there's a certain way not to do it. And yeah, that's kind of. I want to save the rest for the review, which I will be hopefully up on the site sometime soon.